Welcome and thanks for joining us. If you've been tasked with the creation and management of user accounts and groups across a variety of IT systems, then you'll want to watch this short demo video produced by pureIntegration's manager, Sean O'Neill. In it, he'll show you how HP's operations orchestration can drastically reduce the time and resources required to provision and deprovision users as your business needs change.
Hi, I'm Sean O'Neill, and I'm here today to talk about an example of using HP operations orchestration to automate the handling of taking a fairly manual process for one company, which was the giving access to a user to various disparate boxes across their IT environment, and turning that into an almost entirely automated process. So the example is, I'll tell you why this example is important to any company who's going down the path of trying to investigate why would we want to automate. And I'm also going to describe the example in the way it was done, the way it's done now with HPOO in the middle, and also show the flows that are actually done to do the work. So the importance of why the example ought to be heard by companies. First, it's any company in the country who has even a small number of servers understands how much of a headache adding user to the various servers can be, as also as taking their access away. It can be fraught with problems. When humans are involved, there can be mistakes, there can be interruptions, it can cause problems. It's also important because it shows how turning a manual process into an automated process has a quantifiable ROI result that can be measured. So now in the example I'm giving here today is how do you give access to a user to a fairly disparate pool of servers. So the way it was done is they have a large pool of servers. It's close to 700 if you count all types of servers. It's managed by humans with the help of HPSM today. So there is some automation in the process side from HPSM's capabilities. Where that stops though is on the technical runbook side of actually making the changes. They were doing it all manually. So basically there were standards, but in cases in some environments there were no standards, or there was a failure to actually maintain those standards. There were mistakes, typos, fat fingers, the names were spelled wrong, they flip-flopped the first name, the last name, or whatever. It was also not very timely in many, if not most cases. It typically took upwards of a week to get a person completely given access to everything they needed, which was a big problem, especially for brand new hires who were like developers on a big key project or whatever. Terms is a problem we're still currently attacking now. We found that there was no way in their current environment to track where a person lived across these 650 different servers on the Linux Unix side of the world. It's a big problem because if you want to terminate someone, that needs to be timely so that their access is removed. And it was a big problem because they would miss people from time to time on certain boxes. The final problem that hit these guys then is the team that actually did the actual work of adding people and to servers was actually reduced. They were reduced in size, and they were told you will not have backfills. You still got to handle the same load of work you have today and possibly expand it. So HP came in with HPOO, and with our help, we actually showed them how what HPOO could do in a proof of concept. They liked what they saw so much, they actually expanded the scope of the POC and expanded it into what's being done today in production. So now what's being done is they still have lots of boxes. They still use HPSM for the process flow automation, but what's changed is now they have OO is working with HPSM, and it's handling a large workload of what humans used to do. So OO is actually doing the work that humans were doing in the past. Now, how is that? So what good things come from that? All the boxes that OO touches and make changes to are now done via the same standards every time, all the time, without exception. There aren't, which means that the fat fingers are gone. There's the first name and last name information comes out of AD directly, which means that it matches AD every time, all the time. It's very timely. So line items were taking up to a week. It's now done within 60 minutes of a line item being ordered and approved. Typically, it's done within 10 minutes. But depending on the time of the year, and they have some employees that are fairly seasonal, which means that they could have a large influx of people at certain times that may extend the amount of time it takes for all the line items for one person to actually be handled. And then for terminations, we've actually got other flows that we wrote that were outside of this statement of work, but we did it because it was a big benefit to them that helps them clean up their systems, which means that now we can crawl through all the boxes, collect user group and role information, and store it into a login database that will help terminate side of processing to very quickly remove the access for people who've quit or been riffed or whatever. And finally, the prov team, the smaller prov team, is extremely happy with the results they've seen. From a ROI standpoint, this graphic gives you a dollar sense of what this project has done for them. So in the last 12 months, this project has saved, when you use their own overhead data, it's saved them over $275,000 in overhead costs by having OO do the work versus a human do the work. So at a high level, the flow does this. It does 80 group connections. It does SAP role connections. It does IBM group connections, including TSO role grants and access to databases on the IBM. It also does group connections for Linux and Unix, and as well as account creations over there. For SAP and IBM, if the role connection is being done for an account that doesn't exist, it'll automatically create the account, and it will send the user an email with their account information, including a default password that's created for them automatically, and they have to change it the first time they log in. So here, HPSM is being used as by OO to let it know its tasking. It pulls a group of line items that have been approved and ordered, starts to work on them. It then, when the line items are complete, HPOO closes the line item. Any issues, OO will actually note the issue in the line item itself, and it moves the line item to a human queue in HPSM for a review and fixing if necessary. To give an example of what a quote looks like, this is one for a IBM TSO role grant. This gives you some basic information, but here there's you'll have the employee ID is down here at the bottom. There's some information here that tells OO what the ID is for the actual login itself. Tells it what box to talk to and to actually granting this kind of access. This is one that's a little bit more expressive. This is one for Unix and Linux. This actually gives the group requests. So here it's the same thing. You've got the employee number down here. There's a field in here for the ID for the actual login itself. And these fields, the ones that are blacked out, tell you what the host names are and what group on that host name that user needs to have access given to. There's also quotes for SAP. There's one here for AD as well. I didn't give examples of those, but the basic ID is still the same. It's the user, the employee ID, which box it is, and what object they're trying to be added to. So here we see the actual parent flow itself. This is the flow that actually starts the work. This flow is scheduled to run every 10 minutes, and it basically goes in and gets this step goes into HPSM and gets a list of all the open and ordered and approved line items that are currently available. It then goes through each category after it's categorized each line item into AD or IBM or Linux, Unix, and SAP, and it processes them all in that order. They don't have to be processed in that order, but that's just the order we picked. So first it goes into HPSM and it grabs a list of all the line items themselves. There's some processing that's done across line item, to make sure that they're of types that the flow understands, but it basically goes in and checks, is the category of a line item that the line item is actually being actioned against, is it up? Meaning there's not a problem with it. So it actually checks were there line items actually for this category, like say here for AD. It also checks to see is AD provisioning up. There are actually some switches we have in OO where we can turn on and off a different subset of stuff. Like say there's a problem with the IBM. Well, the customer can go into the OO portal and actually turn off IBM, the IBM processing, which means any IBM line that comes in will actually get moved to provisioning to not hold the queue up. So that would happen here. If the IBM stuff's turned off, it gets moved to provisioning right here. So anyway, this flow creates a list of all the ordered and open line items that are to be processed, and it categorizes them by what type they are, AD, SAP, and so on and so forth. So here it comes back here and it actually starts to process stuff. So in this example, I'm going to show the one for IBM. So here it comes into a very basic flow that just iterates across all the IBM line items for any user that line item is actually tied to. And it processes them in serial and hits the next one. This flow then calls the process line item flow itself, which is this guy. So this guy does, this is what does the heavy lift processing on any item that gets done for the IBM category. It first goes into HPSM, grabs the information about the line item, it grabs the the important things, the employee ID, the actual login, the box it's actioning against, and what the object is it's trying to touch. Is it a group? Is it a TSO role grant, or so on and so forth? If there's any problems with the line item, it actually moves the line item to provisioning for a human to actually trying to figure out what's wrong with it. If everything's okay with the line item, it actually starts to process it and goes here. This flow, because the IBMs have multiple transaction types that can be applied against it, this flow figures out, well, what type of transaction is it? And it figures out basically this little switch statement right here, which path to take. Well, if it's a TSO grant or a group connect, it will first check the system and say, does the user already exist on the system? If it does, it'll perform the action, connect them to the role or to the group. If the user does not exist, it automatically creates it. It marks the line item in HPSM with a comment saying, hey, I just created a line item for you for this action because it didn't already exist, and then it does the action itself. So again, as I said before, it figures out what type of line item it is. Is it a group connect TSO role grant? It then goes into this hub flow, and this hub flow is the one that actually does the work for TSO role grant. It creates a list of all the commands that OO needs to run for a specific type of role in TSO. Now again, a TSO role is not something physical on an IBM. It's a human concept. Someone's in the service desk and they need this block of commands executed against their account. If they're in change management, it's this group of commands. But it creates the commands in a very specific order. This part of the flow simply iterates across the commands and runs them. And it keeps track of which commands fail. And if any command fails, it stops processing and then it goes back. So any either positive or negative results are propagated back up to the parent. As you can see here, there's a step for success. There's a step for I had an issue and I have to move this line item to provisioning. And then we have issues with like a flow problem. Something happened in the flow, there was a Java exception or something that in 1,000 years happens from time to time, and it handles it appropriately. And then it comes back up to here. If there was a problem with the flow, it moves it to provisioning. If it goes here, it closes the line item. Closes it, and then it keeps track of some counts, and then it goes back up to the parent, and it basically starts keeping track of what the actions were, and it creates a report. And once the report is done, it goes back to here, and once all processing for all categories has been done for that run of the flow, it basically goes to here, and it actually sends the report out to a list of individuals who are the ones concerned with that processing and want to see how did it go. And as I said before, HPSM has already been marked up with all the line items as to which ones were closed, so they don't have to worry about those anymore, but the ones that had issues have already been moved to a human queue, and the humans will go off and start to handle those issues. And if they need to, they can fix them, or if they fix the issue but didn't do the action, they can move the line item back to the OO queue, and the next run of the flow, it'll pick up that line item and actually process it and close it. Anyway, I hope you found this discussion useful and helpful in your understanding of what OO could do for you in your organization. OO is a very powerful tool that can talk to a wide variety of disparate services, boxes, and WSDLs, REST. It can do SOAP, it can do FTP, it can do SSH, it can do Telnet, it can do, if the entity you have has a IP addressable interface, then OO can probably talk to it and do some action against it. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the conversation, and we look forward to helping you out in the future. Thank you very much.
If you have questions or would like to see how pureIntegration system integrators can help leverage your automation abilities, visit us at pureIntegration.com. Thanks again for joining us.